My wife's family has a Thanksgiving tradition. Each and every year, after the turkey, stuffing, potato salad, and pumpkin pie have been consumed, and the empty dishes are before us, and the conversation has lapsed, and we sit for a moment, slow of mind from blood rushing to our bellies. My late mother-in-law would say to us, "Let's play the alphabet game." The alphabet game is one in which the first person begins, "I am thankful for," and it has to be something that begins with the letter A. For the sake of understanding, let's say that the first person says that she is thankful for apples. Then the next person says, "I'm thankful for apples and," something that begins with the letter B. And then the next person says apples and the letter B and C. You get around the table it goes, with each person reciting in alphabetical order all the thanks that everyone has given, and adding one to the list until the alphabet is exhausted. This always renders hilarious results. And my late father-in-law was always grateful for food. We actually had to make a rule that he could not be grateful for food because he was always going for food items. Each and every year around this time, knowing that the alphabet game is coming up, I spend an inordinate amount of time thinking of things that I am grateful for that begin with the letters X and Z. It's not an easy game to play sometimes. The alphabet game notwithstanding, Thanksgiving is a time to count our blessings, to acknowledge that the shape of our lives might have been otherwise. It is the last remaining religious holiday in the United States. That probably seems strange to say that. Christmas has been co-opted by Madison Avenue, and really is not about the birth of Jesus in our real practice of the holiday, about which more 2 weeks from now. Easter is great if you're a devout Christian. A host of federal holidays celebrate nationalism, something only religious if you believe that God has a special relationship with the United States. And some people actually do. Halloween is religious to neo-pagans and no one else. Thanksgiving is the only religious holiday that everyone can commemorate. It gathers us together to acknowledge gratitude for life itself. It challenges us to consider our blessings and to reflect on the reality that our lives might have been otherwise. It might have been otherwise. To know our blessings, we must acknowledge that the opposite might have been true. We know that our lives could be missing something. It is to speak the truth. Sometimes it's difficult to give thanks. I know that. You might have just lost your job. You might be estranged from someone you love, friend, family, or lover. You might be suffering illness or facing death. You might be dealing with mental illness. You might be feeling lonely or unlovable. You might be facing financial hardship. Under such circumstances, telling people to be grateful, to be thankful, seems like a strange thing, and it may not be exactly where you are. Even in the middle of this, there is something in your life for which to be grateful. It might not be an overwhelming blessing. It might be for life itself, even when it is painful. Years ago, I served as a chaplain, student chaplain. As part of the education of a minister, we have to become a student chaplain somewhere. And my posting was at the pediatric HIV/AIDS clinic at what was then Children's Memorial Hospital in Chicago. It was the early to mid 1990s. I think it was 1994, but I'm not sure about that. The clinic was a strange place. I quickly learned that the children who came there did not need much pastoral care. Most were born with born with HIV. That was why they were there. They never knew a life where they weren't HIV positive. Having that illness was such a part of their lives that they took it for granted that they had to go into the clinic often enough for this, that, and the other. The people in spiritual crisis were the people who cared for the children. Their parents were other caregivers. They often came with feelings of guilt, shame, anger, or the essential question, why me? One of the caregivers that came into the clinic was an elderly man. He told me that his wife had died 2 years ago. His daughter died of HIV/AIDS related illness a year earlier. It was now only his grandson and him in the family, and his grandson was HIV positive because he had been born that way. His grandson was so important to him, and he was grateful. One might think this elderly man would have bemoaned his condition. He was not particularly wealthy. He had worked hard all his life in a job that required hard physical labor. His wife and daughter had died. His later years were spent taking care of a grandson who was often ill, and in those days was also at risk of dying. The medications and treatments we have now for HIV/AIDS did not exist. However that might be, the man told me that he was very grateful for his life and his grandson. Tell me every morning, in the wee hours, he arose and tread softly to his grandson's bedroom to make certain his grandson was well. Then he knelt down outside the door, thanking God in prayer for bringing his grandson into his life, for giving an old man a second chance. The elderly man knew that what his grandson meant to him. His grandson's reliance on him meant that the grandfather had to change his life dramatically. He had to stop drinking. He had to arrange his life so the boy could receive the care that he needed. For that change born out of love, the grandfather was truly grateful. This is at the heart of gratitude. And we need to be grateful even when we face difficult things. When I was younger, I was less grateful. Perhaps with youth comes the constant hope of possibility, and perhaps some disappointment when dreams are not realized. With age comes the reality of loss. As I grow older, though, I am more grateful each passing year for what remains in that loss and what is gained over time. Thanksgiving, though, can also be an uneasy holiday for some Unitarian Universalists because it speaks to the theological place where many of us reside. In brief, to whom are we grateful? Thanksgiving has traditionally been a religious holiday in the sense that people were encouraged to give thanks to God for their blessings. For some in our religious movement, this creates a dilemma because some do not believe that God provides our blessings. This leaves, though, the great reality that even if God is not to be thanked, that it is still possible to be thankful for human care, for beauty and the creative spirit, for nature, for governments and institutions and communities that give us opportunity and care for us. It might have been otherwise. You might have been unloved and uncared for. You might have been born in more repressive times. You might have been living under a dictatorship or religious intolerance. You might never have had the teacher who encouraged your abilities and challenged you to do better. You might never have found love, and even if love is lost, to have loved at all is still to live. You might never have found friends who could laugh deeply with you. You might never have found that which brought meaning, purpose, or beauty into your life. Even if you do not believe in God, there is still enough to give thanks for. If nothing else, thanks to the people and community that sustain you in the here and now, because without them it might be otherwise. The other dilemma that some Unitarian Universalists face at Thanksgiving is what to do with it. As it is, Thanksgiving Day is a family gathering with gratitude to the world or to God. For many of us, this is acceptable, and that is the tradition. For others, that renders Thanksgiving a day of gluttony and pietistic practice, nothing useful or meaningful. And I know some Unitarian Universalists who have that dilemma. It is not that those who do not celebrate Thanksgiving with this ease are ingrates, unthankful for their blessings, whatever their source. Rather, some want to do something more meaningful with Thanksgiving Day. They want to do something more than thanking God and gorging on turkey. But how can that be accomplished? Though I know that many Unitarian Universalists are not fond of him, Paul of Tarsus from the Bible does give an answer. In his second letter to the Corinthians, he writes, God is able to provide you every blessing in abundance, so that by always having enough of everything, you may share abundantly in every good work. There it is. Thanksgiving is not about an accounting of blessings, but also a sharing of them. Pass the blessing on. Find what gives joy and meaning to your life and pass it on. In my own life, I experienced this sharing after a particularly difficult time. During that difficult time, I was sustained by the patient listening and support of my colleagues in New England ministerial gatherings of Unitarian Universalist ministers who helped me face a painful period in my life. I found myself again in Boston and thinking of the kindness of my friends and colleagues. I wondered how I might show support and gratitude for their kindness. With a little bit of extra money jingling in my pocket, I came up with an idea. And I know this is my thing, and I felt very blessed, and I wanted to give something really good to people who had been kind to me. I purchased 2 season tickets to do 2 different series of the Boston Symphony, and treated my colleagues to dinner and an orchestra performance as a way of thanking each one of them. When a colleague was married or partnered, I gave both concert tickets as a way of thanking the colleague for blessing my life with kindness and support. That was my way of sharing my blessings and thanking other Unitarian Universalist ministers. We don't make it through this world alone. We make it through the things that we have to do with support of people who care about us. As we count our blessings this year, acknowledging that it might have been otherwise, let us also think of what can be done for those for whom it truly was otherwise. Let us consider giving what we have to charities or causes we care about. Let us consider volunteering for organizations that need our help. Let us think about hounding our elected representatives about inequality, poverty, and healthcare, and many other issues. They are in there and they need our attention. Let us, as Paul writes, share abundantly in every good work, from that for which we are grateful. As Unitarian layman and humanitarian Albert Schweitzer wrote, to educate yourself for the feeling of gratitude means to take nothing for granted, but to always seek out and value the kind that will stand behind the action. Nothing that is done for you is a matter of course. Everything originates in a will for the good, which is directed at you. Train yourself never to put off the word or action for the expression of gratitude. There's a conspiracy against gratitude. Gratitude means being satisfied with what one has, with who one is, with where one is. Forces in the world do not want gratitude or acceptance. The advertising industry often has to make us feel ungrateful for where we are to sell us stuff. After all, if one is grateful with what one has or with whom one is, then there is no need to consume more and more goods and services. A certain feeling of inadequacy or ingratitude has to be instilled into the consumer to encourage the consumer to purchase more to fill an empty emotional space. And that does really not work. One will not have true friends by buying a more expensive automobile. Cosmetics are only a temporary fix. One is loved for who one truly is, not for one's appearance. Owning something rarely provides lasting joy unless in some way that thing is shared with others. If a life is approached with gratitude, then giving thanks acts as a tonic to feelings of emptiness and inadequacy. Acknowledging blessings regularly encourages the mind not to think constantly about things that can be bought, but acts that reflect inner peace, inner joy. Today we have traveled through Thanksgiving, and we have examined that at the heart of gratitude is the realization that our lives might have been bereft of the blessings we have known through art, love, and purpose. We can acknowledge our blessings best when we share them. We are not ingrates. We know that many people of kind and generous feeling have brought us to this day. We can be grateful for the natural world. We can list our blessings and we can pass our blessings on. In giving thanks, we know that life is often painful and tragic. We know that every home has encountered death and loss. We are grateful, though, that we still live and can offer something good to this world. What other way might we live thankfully? Out of the wilderness of despair and disappointment, we come to affirm that life is worth living, and living is more abundant as we take nothing for granted. May we bless the world with our thanks and be grateful for the life that we have, with all the grounding of our being. So be it. Blessed be. Amen.